Flight attendants and pilots of Reddit. What are some things that happen mid-flight that only the crew are aware of? There's a special frequency called GUARD that all aircrafts are supposed to monitor. It's for emergencies, or for when an aircraft ends up on a wrong frequency and the controllers need to get contact with them to change them to the right one. It's full of pilots meowing at each other and people accidentally asking for gate assignments and making other radio calls.
We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description.
Story 2. Pilot here, late to the party as usual, but sometimes the passengers may be having a nice, quiet flight in the back, while the pilots are up front dodging thunderstorms and yelling their heads off. We will not only transport dead bodies, but also live transplants like hearts and lungs. I particularly like the live transplants because we get to cut to the front of the line for takeoff and we get all the shortcuts to our destination. Tip for those who get motion sickness, try not to move your head around. Pilots move with their eyes instead of their heads to look at the instruments in the flight deck. Also, try to sit in a seat over the wing. This area of the plane doesn't rotate as much during climbs and descents. Flight attendants can't do pilots' jobs, but pilots can't do flight attendants' jobs for sure. We aren't hired for our people skills. Don't take off your shoes to go to the bathroom. People pee on the floor all the time. People do that? They take their shoes off to go to the bathroom in like a public place? I better not see any comments in this video saying that you do that. That's so weird. Stop it. Get some help. Story 3. I've got an original one for you all. There's a radio frequency we are required to monitor. It's called GUARD. It's for emergency use and is designed for maydays and for air traffic control to reach aircrafts that may have lost radio connection, or to relay messages from aircraft to other aircraft, etc. Every day this frequency is abused. You will hear hundreds of professional aviators meowing, yelling obscenities at each other, and making fun of one airline or another. Oftentimes, what will start it is some poor guy accidentally transmitting his PA announcement to passengers on the GUARD frequency, followed by the very mature outbreaks for about 5 to 10 minutes. It's the worst on the East Coast. When the first story mentioned meowing, I thought that was like code for something. I didn't really question it. And then this one just reaffirmed that, do pilots really meow over this frequency? Story 4. A former teacher told us a story that fits the question. Every year he would make trips to Europe that were for an educational experience or related to the subject he taught in one way or another. In reality, it was just an amazing way to spend 2 weeks in Europe. One year he took a student's brother with, since he needed an extra person to have the minimum amount of required students. After a 10-hour flight, the flight attendant walks up to him and asks if said brother was a part of his group. He said yes. Apparently, on the flight, he stopped the flight attendant and asked her to bang with him in the bathroom. She denied, but he continued to ask several more times. It reached a point to where she no longer felt anywhere near comfortable. She asked my teacher if she could notify the authorities and have him sent back to the States. He agreed. There were no immediate flights back home, so a distant relative of his had to be contacted. He stayed with a relative he had never even met for an entire weekend. He was then put on a flight back home the following week. Story 5. Flight attendants don't get paid on the ground, only flying hours are paid. We are slave labor on the ground, and duties are continually added to our unpaid work time because the company knows they don't have to pay us. We show up 2 to 3 hours before we even start getting paid, and some days we will work up to 14-hour days and only get paid for 5 or 6 of them. It should be illegal. Please be kind when you are boarding the plane and getting all pissy about your bags, etc. The flight attendant is a volunteer while she is helping you on the ground. She is essentially doing you a favor. Story 6. This started off with us blissfully unaware, ended with mild pant crapping. I was flying to France in one of those planes with the TV screen up front to show the flight path and where you currently are. I was just about to fall asleep when the captain asked over the PA if there was a doctor on board and if they could go to seat number. I knew this was bad. The flight path changed to Canada and we had to make an emergency landing. We were stuck there for 2 hours. When we finally got to France, his entire row was quarantined off. I have no idea what the frick happened. Story 7. Ex-airline employee here. Often we'd have someone on board with terrible body odor. You can set the temperature in one end of the cabin hotter and it localizes the smell to one part of the plane. If you see coffee filter bags hanging anywhere, it's because someone smells like garbage on the plane. Flight attendants often talk about the hot guy in 23B or whatever seat he's in. Pilots screw around a lot up front. They'll take pictures, post on Facebook, watch movies. Automation has taken over a lot of the work on long flights. Story 8. I was only a month or 2 out of IOE, initial operating experience at my first airline job, flying right seat in a regional jet. I had just come back from the bathroom when the captain pointed that several flight instruments on his side had failed, and he had reverted to using data from my side. Basically told his main flight display to start using data from the second independent system. Soon, however, that went bad too. The autopilot disconnected. And here we are at 25,000 feet or so in icing, hand flying off a tiny little combined last-ditch backup instrument called an IESI, Integrated Electronic Standby Instrument, if memory serves. We declared an emergency, asked ATC to point us in the direction of better weather, and tried to figure out what the hell was happening. Icing on both primary pilot tubes, maybe. Though that shouldn't happen, they're heated. In any case, we ended up making a perfectly safe landing after a diversion, and the passengers never had any idea that for a few minutes, I was really concerned that things were about to turn very, very bad, and that we were down to our emergency backup gauge. Story 9. Not an airline pilot yet, just got hired by my first airline and start classes next month, but I've been a pilot for 6 years. I primarily teach Chinese airline pilots how to fly, but I've done some passenger operations and business aircraft on the side. First of all of the comments about pilots making cat sounds and Chewbacca noises is 100% true. Also, whenever someone leaves an area and switches frequencies, they'll yell, "See ya!" And then a dozen other pilots will key up saying, "See ya," one after another. We also enjoy talking crap about people who say, "With you," "Got him on the fish finder," "Any traffic, please advise," and "Tree and Fife." Also, the things that scare passengers don't faze the pilots one bit. We don't give a crap about turbulence or having to do a go-around. The things I don't like are things you generally won't know about. Thunderstorm dodging, microburst alerts, ice, maintenance issues, etc. The more I hear about this guard frequency, the more I want to just listen in over the course of a day. It's always hilarious to hear about trained professionals who you assume are, very professional because they're doing an important job. Like, you'd think they're serious, basically. But no, they're just screwing around like the rest of us at work. Story 10. Former flight attendant here. Landing gear got stuck on descent. We flew in circles for ages just waiting to see if we needed to crash land or not. Luckily, the gear eventually came down. Passengers never knew something was wrong. One time I accidentally spilled coffee creamer on a bald dude's head while he was sleeping during service. Myself and everyone around him silently agreed to say nothing. He looked as if a bird pooped on his head. I still feel guilty about it. Never drink the coffee. I have never seen those machines cleaned. Story 11. Not a pilot or flight attendant, but once I was flying to Chicago and we had some mechanical problems. It sounded like an engine went out. The pilot got on the mic and said that the reverse thrusters went out in one of the engines and we needed to make an unscheduled stop somewhere in BFE. The plane landed but took a really long time to stop. We were all put on another plane going to Chicago and were told to just grab an open seat. I later asked a pilot friend of mine about that. I wondered why a problem with the reverse thruster in an engine would be caused to make an emergency landing. He told me that it wasn't. The reverse thrusters get pressurized when the landing gear goes down so they can't be used mid-flight. There is nothing serious about them going out that would require an emergency stop. He then told me that the pilot lied to us, as it was probably something much, much more serious like the engine going out, just like I thought. Story 12. Here's a story about a weather phenomenon I saw only once in 6,000 hours of airline flying. We had a severe icing encounter with SLD, supercooled large droplets, that none of our official training covered. The only two people who knew how close we came to an incident/accident were myself and the first officer. It was a gorgeous spring day in Central California, as we were climbing through 15,000 feet near Bakersfield on the way to LAX. We had departed FAT and my first officer was hand-flying the EMB 120. This was a little unusual, but he was partially bored, had been away on vacation, and was feeling out the plane since we had just swapped aircrafts. No two planes fly exactly the same, especially due to shifting passenger load, fuel, and baggage. We had flown several months together in the prior year, so I knew he was an extremely competent airman. In this case, we were lucky that the autopilot wasn't on because it would have masked a very dangerous situation. What we didn't know was that we were flying into an area of severe icing, which turned out to be a freak microclimate. We are 20-something minutes into the flight and the FO declares, "Something is wrong, the controls are getting sluggish." I immediately check our airspeed and it's about 60 kts. Slow, but our pitch and power are normal. The FO started to lower the nose and said, "I don't think we can continue the climb." We were slowing through 160 kts but should be above 180. If we get near 120, we'd lose control of the aircraft. What the hell? The OAT, outside air temperature, was -10 Celsius, but the sky was totally clear. I lean forward and look at the wiper blades and see a solid ½ inch of ice coating them, and flowing/crusting up above the window trim. None of this was visible from a normal seated position. Oh crap. I throw all the anti-ice switches on and start to bring the props forward. They were in partial cruise power, which is a lower RPM. In the Brasilia, it was normal to bring the props back several times during the climb to reduce cabin noise/vibration, as well as save on wear and combat pilot fatigue, all of which does not degrade climb performance, except in icing. As soon as I touched the condition levers to increase RPM, the whole plane started shaking violently. Damn, ice on the props, it's bad. If I tried to bring them up, I could damage the aircraft. Had these two fatal accidents in mind, ASA 23011 and ASA 592. I craned my neck to look at the spinner and it was frosted in white powder. Low RPM, ice, and low airspeed are a dangerous combo. I advise ATC that we are in severe icing, could not continue the climb, and need an immediate descent. On a perfect, calm day, this was a shock to the controller. While he was pondering, we had already started descending to 14,000 feet. Aviate, navigate, communicate. The props then started to shed the ice, which was slapping against the fuselage. It has a reinforced plate bolted to the skin for this reason, but I doubt any of the passengers noticed. One of the benefits of having high-time pilots is they get used to every possible noise, smell, and sensation that the plane can make, which can be crucial for good judgment. Years earlier, I could have avoided smoke in the cockpit at night over the Everglades had I trusted my nose prior to takeoff. Had my first officer not been hand-flying, unlike Eagle 4184, had we missed a full night's sleep, had it been after midnight on our 8th leg of the day, had I not put 2 and 2 together quickly, we would have had a roll upset and possibly bent the airframe and or torn the tail off performing a recovery. The icing happened so fast and without warning that it nearly exceeded our perception ability. The SLD accumulation was so rapid that the ice warning system never detected it. This was also a case where human beats automation. If the autopilot was on, it would have fought asymmetric force until it exceeded its design limitation, then failed, snapped off, and put us upside down in a spiral dive. Lucky for us, the first officer was busy flying and I was busy troubleshooting, which is how CRM, crew resource management, should work. Some people insist that automation can solve any in-flight emergency. Pilots are just switch monkeys, right? In this scenario, full automation could have led to an accident. The Brasilia was a fantastic aircraft. It would have made an amazing medium bomber in World War II, and I truly trusted the design. It was rugged, fast, and well-engineered. However, it had a history of roll upsets. Trivia time: tip to tip, the propeller blades are 18 feet and produce tremendous gyroscopic force. Lesson for other pilots: always bring the props to full RPM prior to encountering icing or if you suspect icing is in the area. Not only does it help resist/shed ice sooner, but full power is available when needed. This was not SOP, standard operating procedure, or part of the QRH, Quick Reference Handbook at the time. In our defense, we had no way of detecting SLD. There were no PIREPs, pilot reports, visible moisture, or other indicators besides OAT. We also had no rationale to run the prop or wing boots prior to encountering ice. The entire event lasted less than 5 minutes, but it only takes a couple of minutes of inattention to endanger helpless passengers. Flying should be slightly stressful, even on clear weather days. This read like a full-on accident report. This is insanely detailed and, I feel like a lot of it went over my head. But I hope somehow listening to it was easier than reading it for comprehension. OP also mentioned a few other flight numbers that I didn't say because I felt like at some point it just became too much because, let's be real, you guys aren't going to look it up. That was a lot of pilot jargon and, I hope you guys kept up. That being said, it's a great example of what the prompt is asking for, yeah? All these passengers probably had no idea that they were in real mortal danger and the pilot saved the day, so good work, OP. Story 13. Flight attendant here. If someone acts like a major jerk mid-flight, we will have security meet you on the ground at your destination. We have limited resources available, so if you complain about wanting steak but we only have chicken left, there are literally 0 things we can do about it. There is only so much space we have to stock all the goodies. There may be major drama going on between crew members, but we do our best to hide it and give good customer service. I have literally cried behind a wall before because a crew member was being condescending and rude, and walked out into the cabin smiling afterward. We make fun of people for being rude, being inconsiderate of others, playing videos out loud, clipping toenails, eating salt-dried fish, and leaving the bones on the floor. People will literally ask us about mileage points and why they didn't get upgrades and why their bag got delayed. And how, oh no, they're going to miss their connection. If there is a major delay flying into a city, we literally hide in the galleys to avoid people asking us questions. If a passenger is rude to our face, we will crunch up the snack mix or cookie before handing it to them, essentially giving them a bag of crumbs. Story 14. Corporate pilot here. Passengers bang a lot in the cabin of the airplane. Often there are no curtains or doors between the cockpit and the cabin. Generally, when the back end of the plane is moving side to side or up and down through the air, and there is no known turbulence, the eye stays straight ahead. Also, we fly a lot of escorts. If your significant other travels on a private airplane often, ask who the other passengers are. Sounds like on these corporate flights, there are 2 cockpits. Haha! Story 15. My brother-in-law is a captain for a budget airline in the UK. Last year, he desperately needed to crap before landing. The only toilet on the aircraft is at the back of the plane. He strolled to the back and had his leisurely crap. Meanwhile, the first officer had to circle the airport 4 to 5 times as they couldn't land without the captain. They made an excuse, something like a backup queue for the runway, and eventually my brother-in-law strolled back down through the aircraft, leaving a stench behind him no one could have predicted, to rejoin the cockpit. Their delay backed up other aircraft landing that day, all because he needed to crap. Story 16. Flight attendant here. So many things that passengers would not love/understand if only they knew. From the cockpit, night sectors with minimum crew, we often have to take up extra pillows/blankets at request of the pilot so they can sleep. One pilot will stay awake at all times, but still disconcerting when you have to go up and see the captain snoring contentedly while tucked into his first-class Duna, while still in his reclined LHS seat. An occasion when I was a little concerned was a flight, within last 5 years. I headed up to clear the flight deck, only to see large paper maps spread out over the instruments. Destination was new to both pilots, both fairly new to aircraft type, and they were just double-checking / discussing options. It was actually great CRM in establishing clear comms and planning, and they were using paper maps instead of iPads just to get a better / clearer picture. But it didn't reassure me walking into that. When seeing my look, the pilot's response was, "Don't stress, we just haven't been here before." I cleared the deck and got the hell out of there to let them do their thing, but did mention to my crew to make sure we do our checks especially thoroughly for that landing. Also, pilots are not hired for their people skills and are often not great at communicating with cabin crew, so quite often there will be snarkiness between flight deck and cabin crew. Also, differences between older, usually white, usually men in flight deck, and predominantly younger cabin crew, largely young women and gay men from all racial backgrounds due to need for language skills, can lead to personality clashes that the passengers will have no idea about. One of the airlines I work for still has issues with pilots not wanting gay male cabin crew to touch or prepare their food, and they'll often request only the female crew to bring up their crew meals, or only offer the jump seat in the flight deck for landing to prettier, younger female crew. Several flights I've been on had a palpable sense of loathing between cabin crew and pilots, passengers completely unaware. In terms of the cabin, again, lots happening that most passengers will never know about. Deaths, medical issues, drunk people getting cut off from drinking and being threatened with arrest on arrival, sexist, racist, homophobic behavior from passengers that is incredibly widespread. Most passengers, except those in direct sight of the issue, will have no idea. Some of this may be reported to authorities on landing, but for the most part, cabin crew just have to put up with it, and will just complain like crazy in the galley. And if you think you're getting attitude from your cabin crew, keep in mind they've probably been verbally abused at least once that day, possibly groped multiple times. Mainland China is a hated destination for crew because passengers, male and female, will just reach out and poke or grab a body part, butt, thigh, boob, abdomen, whatever, to get your attention to get a drink or more food. And they've definitely been treated like utter crap by more than one passenger and possibly one of their colleagues, so be nice. Say please and thank you. And take off your freaking noise-canceling headphones when you can see we're speaking with you. Flight attendant pet peeve there.